I never thought I'd forget the sound of my own son's voice, but I did. It's strange how 20 years can pass, and the details start to fade. His laughter, the way he said "Mom," the sound of his boots running down the hallway before school. Sometimes, when the house gets too quiet, I close my eyes and try to hear him again, but all I get is silence, a silence that became my closest companion over the years. My name is Margaret Hayes, and this is the story of the day I finally saw my son again, after 2 long decades apart. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. The sky was soft and gray, the kind that makes everything look still. I was sitting on the porch with my cup of tea, watching the maple trees sway in the wind. Then the phone rang. When I picked it up and heard a familiar voice on the other end, my heart stopped. It was me. Daniel. My boy. He didn't say much, just that he was in town for a few days and wondered if I'd like to meet. His voice sounded older, deeper, careful. The way people sound when they're trying to hide too much. I said yes, of course. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. After I hung up, I just sat there for a long time, staring at the empty road leading up to my house. 20 years is a long time to wait for a son who walked away. A long time to replay every word, every argument, every missed birthday. But that morning, as the light filtered through the lace curtains, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Quiet. Fragile hope. I didn't know what would happen when I saw him again. Would he still hate me? Would he even remember the home we once shared? The smell of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings? The sound of the radio in the kitchen? All I knew was this. I had prayed for this moment for half my life, and now that it was finally here, I didn't know if my heart could bear it. I still remember the day Daniel was born. It was the middle of October, crisp air, golden leaves falling outside the hospital window. The nurse placed him in my arms, and I remember thinking, so this is what love feels like. He had a tiny tuft of dark hair and the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. Even then, he looked like his father. Back then, our life was simple. We lived in a small white house at the edge of town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and waved from their porches. My husband, Tomas, worked at the hardware store on Main Street, and I stayed home with Daniel. Our days were ordinary, but full. Mornings started with pancakes and coffee, afternoons with walks to the post office or the park. Daniel was a curious boy, always asking questions about everything, how birds learned to fly, why the stars only came out at night. He was quiet, thoughtful, but with a spark that lit up every room. Sometimes I'd watch him sitting on the floor, building tiny cities out of wooden blocks, and think to myself, he's going to do something great one day. When Tom passed away, Daniel was only 14. It was sudden, a heart attack that took him in his sleep. One day he was fixing the fence out back, humming along to the radio, and the next, he was gone. The house fell silent after that. Daniel stopped smiling as much. He'd still go to school, still do his chores, but there was something in his eyes, something distant. I tried my best to hold things together. I got a part-time job at the diner downtown to help pay the bills, and Daniel would help around the house when he could. But we started missing each other in ways I couldn't fix. He was growing up too fast, and I was just trying to keep us both from falling apart. We used to sit on the porch together after dinner, just watching the sun go down. Those were the moments I loved most. Sometimes he'd lean against me and say, "Mom, it's going to be okay, right?" And I'd smile and say, "Yes, sweetheart, it's going to be okay," even when I wasn't sure if it was. But as he got older, our talks grew shorter. He started hanging out with new friends from school, kids I didn't know much about. He'd come home later, sometimes with a look in his eyes that told me he'd been somewhere he shouldn't. One night, I waited up for him. It was nearly midnight when I heard his car pull into the driveway. I tried to sound calm when he came in, but my heart was pounding. "Daniel, it's late," I said softly. "You should have called," he sighed, avoiding my eyes. "I'm fine, Mom. Stop worrying." I wanted to say more, to ask where he'd been, but the way he looked at me, tired, almost angry, made me swallow the words. That was the start of the distance between us. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like watching the tide go out and realizing the water isn't coming back. He finished high school, and for a while I thought things were getting better. He started working part-time at a local auto shop, saving up money, talking about going to college in another state. I told him I was proud of him, and I was. But deep down, I was afraid too. Afraid of being left behind. When he finally got accepted into a university in California, I remember standing in his room the night before he left. His things were packed in boxes and the walls were bare. It didn't look like his room anymore. He hugged me at the door the next morning. It was quick, awkward, the kind of hug you give when you're already halfway gone. "I'll call you when I get there," he said. And then he was gone. At first, he did call, every Sunday. He'd tell me about his classes, his new apartment, the friends he'd made. I'd sit by the phone all week, waiting for those 15 minutes of his voice, but the calls got shorter. Then less frequent, and before I knew it, months went by without a word. I told myself he was busy, that he was building a life like any young man should. But sometimes, when the phone stayed silent too long, I'd find myself whispering his name into the quiet house, as if he could somehow hear me. I kept his room the same for years. Same blue comforter. Same framed photo of him and his father on the dresser. I'd dust it every week, straighten the pillows, even though no one slept there anymore. The neighbors would ask how he was doing, and I'd smile and say, "Oh, he's doing great." Real busy with work, but inside, I felt the ache of every unanswered letter, every missed birthday, every Christmas that came and went without his voice on the other end of the line. Sometimes I wondered if I'd done something wrong. If maybe I'd pushed too hard, or not enough. If maybe, in trying to protect him, I'd built a wall he didn't know how to climb back over. I prayed for him every night, not just for his safety, but for his heart, that wherever he was, he'd still feel loved, even if he didn't love me back anymore. And so the years went by. One season faded into the next. The paint on the porch peeled, the maple tree out front grew taller, and my hair turned silver. But I never stopped setting 2 plates at the table, one for me and one for the son who never came home, until that Thursday morning, when the phone finally rang. It was a Thursday morning when the phone rang, the kind of morning where nothing felt different at first. The sun had just started to peek through the curtains, and the kettle was whistling on the stove. I almost didn't answer it. Most calls these days were from telemarketers or church volunteers reminding me about Sunday potlucks. But something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said, setting the kettle down. For a few seconds, all I heard was static, then a quiet breath. "Mom?" The world stopped. That voice, older now, rougher, but still his. My knees felt weak, and I had to grip the edge of the counter. "Daniel?" I whispered. "Yeah," he said softly. "It's me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just silence, the kind that holds years inside it. My heart raced, torn between joy and disbelief. I wanted to say 1,000 things, but none came out right. "I wasn't sure you'd still have the same number," he said. "I never changed it," I replied, my voice trembling. "I never wanted to." He let out a small sigh, and I could almost hear the smile in it. "I thought about calling for a long time," he said. "I just didn't know what I'd say." I felt tears rise to my eyes, but I blinked them back. "You don't have to say anything right now," I told him gently. "Just hearing your voice is enough." There was another pause. Then he said, "Mom, can I come home?" The words hit me like a wave. I turned toward the window, watching the sunlight pour through the lace curtains. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "Of course, sweetheart," I whispered. "You don't even have to ask." He came 3 days later. I remember standing on the porch, my hands trembling as I straightened my sweater for the 10th time. The same porch where I'd watched him leave 2 decades earlier. A car pulled up to the curb, black, a little dusty from the road. The engine cut off, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. When he stepped out, my heart almost gave out. He looked older, of course. Broader shoulders, lines around his eyes, a faint streak of gray in his hair. But it was him, my Daniel. He walked up the path slowly, like someone afraid the ground might vanish beneath him. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, and never let go. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the years between us, or the fear of scaring him away again, so I just stood there, my hand over my heart. When he finally reached the porch, he smiled a little. "Hi, Mom." That's all it took. I broke. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. For a second he hesitated, stiff, uncertain. And then I felt his arms close around me, firm and trembling. We stayed like that for a long time. When I finally pulled back, I saw tears glistening in his eyes. "You look good," I said softly. "Tired, but good." He chuckled under his breath. "You haven't changed much." I laughed, even though it came out shaky. Well, my knees would argue otherwise. Inside the house, everything was the same, maybe too much the same. I'd kept the old photographs on the wall. His high school trophies on the shelf, even that chipped blue mug he used to love, he noticed immediately. "You kept all this?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost guilty. "Of course," I said. "This house still remembers you?" "Daniel." He walked through each room like he was rediscovering pieces of himself. The smell of cinnamon in the kitchen, the faded quilt on the couch, the old family photo above the mantel, the one of us at the county fair when he was 10. He stopped in front of it and stared for a long time. "Dad's smile," he said quietly. I used to forget what it looked like. I stepped beside him. "You never really forget, honey. Sometimes you just tuck it away." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Over dinner, things were awkward, like talking to an old friend you once knew by heart but can't quite reach anymore. I made his favorite, chicken pot pie, and we sat at the small wooden table that had seen a lifetime of laughter and arguments. "So," I said gently, "what's life been like? Tell me everything." He hesitated, cutting his food more than eating it. "I live in Oregon now," he said finally. "I work at a small design firm. It's fine, quiet." "That sounds nice," I said with a smile. "Do you have someone special?" He shook his head. "No, not anymore." Something in his voice told me not to press, so I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What made you call?" He looked down at his hands for a long time before answering. "I got sick last winter," he said finally. "Nothing serious, just something that scared me." I felt my heart clench. "Oh, Daniel." He waved it off gently. "I'm okay now. But when I was lying there in that hospital bed, all I could think about was you. All the years I wasted being angry." I reached across the table, laying my hand over his. "We all make mistakes, sweetheart. The important thing is you came back." He swallowed hard, his thumb brushing against my knuckles. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," I smiled sadly. "You're my son. There's nothing in this world that could make me stop wanting to see you." After dinner, we sat in the living room. The lamp cast a soft glow over the room, and the old clock ticked gently in the background. He leaned back on the couch, his eyes wandering. "It's strange being here again," he said. "It feels smaller somehow." "Maybe you just grew," I said. "That's what time does. It changes how we see everything." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I used to think you didn't understand me. Back then, I was so sure you were holding me back." "I know," I whispered. "You wanted space. I was just too afraid to let go." He looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the boy he used to be flicker in his eyes. "I said things I shouldn't have," he said. "I was cruel." I smiled softly, shaking my head. "You were young and hurting." "We both were." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice breaking a little. "I thought cutting you off would make it easier. But it didn't. It just hollowed me out." I felt my throat tighten, but I stayed calm. "Sometimes we have to lose each other to understand what we had." He nodded slowly, and for a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking between us. When he went to bed that night, in his old room, still smelling faintly of the past, I stood in the doorway for a while, watching him. He'd fallen asleep quickly, like someone finally resting after a long journey, and I whispered, "Welcome home, my boy." The next morning, I woke up early and made breakfast, eggs, toast, and coffee, just the way he liked it. We sat together on the porch as the morning fog lifted from the fields. He looked out over the street and said, "I forgot how quiet this town is." "Peaceful," I said with a small smile. "The kind of quiet that listens back," he nodded. Then, almost hesitantly, he said, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I didn't say anything right away. I just watched him, this man who had once been my little boy, and realized I didn't need an apology to forgive him. I'd already done that a long time ago. So I said simply, 'I know. And I forgive you.'" He looked down, blinking fast. "How can you be so calm about it?" "Because holding on to pain doesn't bring anyone home," I said softly. "But forgiveness does." That day, we went through old boxes from the attic, photographs, school papers, little keepsakes. Every picture told a story, first days, birthdays, laughter frozen in time. He found an old drawing he made in second grade, a stick figure family, smiling under a big sun. "You kept this?" he asked, holding it gently. I laughed. "I kept everything, Daniel, even the crayon marks on the wall." He smiled, a real smile this time, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. That evening, as the sun set behind the maple tree, he said something that stayed with me. "I don't know how to start over," he said quietly. "I don't even know who I am without all that guilt." I reached out, touching his arm. "You start by sitting here, by breathing, by knowing you're loved, even now." He looked at me, tears shining in his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, he let them fall. That night, it rained. Not the harsh kind of rain that crashes against windows, but the gentle kind, steady, rhythmic, almost comforting. The house felt wrapped in its sound. I was sitting by the living room window with a cup of tea, watching droplets slide down the glass, when I heard Daniel's footsteps behind me. He stood there for a moment, silent. Then he said, "Mom, can we talk?" I turned to look at him. His face was serious, his eyes shadowed with something heavy. "Of course," I said softly. "Sit down." He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The lamplight flickered faintly over his face, older now, but I could still see the little boy in him, hiding somewhere behind those tired eyes. "I've been thinking," he started, "about that night, the night I left." I felt my heart squeeze, but I stayed quiet. "I remember yelling," he said. "I remember saying things I didn't mean, that I hated this house, that I hated you. But I never told you why." He looked up at me, and the weight in his eyes nearly broke me. "I left because I was scared," he said. "After Dad died, everything felt wrong. You were strong, too strong maybe. You kept going, working, cooking, pretending everything was fine. But I wasn't fine. I was angry at the world, and I didn't know how to be angry without hurting someone." I swallowed hard. My fingers tightened around the teacup. "You didn't have to protect me from that, Daniel," I whispered. "I would have understood." He shook his head. "No, Mom, I didn't know how to let you in. I thought if I ran far enough, I could outgrow the pain. But it followed me. The rain outside grew steadier, like it was listening." He went on, his voice trembling now. "For years I told myself I didn't need anyone. I buried myself in work, moved from city to city, but every birthday, every Christmas, every time I walked by a mother and son, I thought of you. And I hated myself for what I did." I set my cup down and reached for his hand. "Daniel." He covered his face with both hands. "When Dad passed, I felt so useless. You were holding everything together, and I couldn't even hold myself together. I thought I was letting you down." Tears welled in my eyes, and I could barely speak. "Sweetheart, you were just a boy. You lost your father, too. I was so busy being strong, I forgot you needed me to be soft." He looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw the years of guilt sitting behind his eyes. "You were never the problem, Mom. I was. I left because I couldn't forgive myself for being weak." I shook my head slowly. "You weren't weak, Daniel. You were grieving. We both were. We just didn't know how to do it together." He laughed softly, a broken, tired laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," I said, my voice steady now. "It's just time. Time makes you see things clearer. Time softens what once felt unbearable." He looked down at his hands again, his voice quiet. "I used to dream about coming home. But in those dreams, you were always angry. You'd shut the door in my face." I reached out and touched his cheek. In my dreams, I whispered. You always came home. He closed his eyes, and a single tear slipped down his face. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that says more than words ever could. The rain began to ease, the air heavy and still. After a moment, he said, "There's something else I never told you." I felt a small knot form in my stomach. "What is it, son?" He hesitated, then said, "I had a family once." My breath caught. "You did?" He nodded. "A wife, a daughter. Her name was Lily." I stared at him, speechless. "You have a daughter?" He nodded again, his eyes glassy. "Had. She was 5 when she passed away. We lost her in a car accident. That was 10 years ago." I covered my mouth, the pain hitting like a slow wave. "Oh, Daniel." He swallowed hard. After that, I couldn't breathe. My wife left a year later. I don't blame her. We both drowned in that grief, just in different ways. I thought I'd never feel anything again, and for a long time I didn't. He paused, wiping his eyes. That's when I realized I had lost everything that mattered. And all I could think about was you. I had one person left in this world who might still love me, and I'd thrown her away. My heart broke open. I moved closer, placing my hand on his shoulder. "You didn't throw me away," I whispered. "You were lost, that's all." He looked at me, his face crumbling with emotion. "I just wish I'd come back sooner." I nodded gently. "You came back when you were ready, Daniel. Sometimes we don't find the road home until our hearts can bear the journey." He let out a shaky breath, nodding, tears slipping freely now. I kept waiting for forgiveness, but I see now you never stopped giving it. "I forgave you the moment you left," I said quietly, "because I understood why." Later that night, we sat together in the darkened living room. The rain had stopped. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards. He said softly, "It feels like I've been carrying a ghost for 20 years. "Then let's put it down," I told him. "Right here. You don't have to carry it anymore." He looked at me, really looked, and in that moment, something changed. The tension in his shoulders eased. The pain in his eyes softened. He leaned back and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." "For what?" I asked. "For still being here." I smiled through my tears. "That's what mothers do, sweetheart. We wait. We always wait." That night when he went to bed, I stayed awake for a long time. I looked around the house, the photos, the furniture, the familiar quiet, and realized something I hadn't in years. It wasn't sadness I felt anymore. It was peace. Because even after 20 years apart, even after all the silence and sorrow, my son was home again, and that was enough. The next morning, the house felt lighter. For the first time in years, I made breakfast for 2. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen, mixing with the scent of coffee and buttered toast. A smell I had missed more than I realized. Daniel walked in wearing the same t-shirt from the night before. His hair a little messy, like when he was a teenager. He smiled shyly, as if he wasn't sure how to fit into this picture yet. "You're up early," he said. "I never stopped being an early riser," I replied, placing a plate in front of him. Old habits. He sat down and looked at the food. Bacon, scrambled eggs, a stack of pancakes. "You remembered," he said quietly. "I used to ask for this every Sunday." I smiled, a little sadly. Some things a mother doesn't forget. He picked up his fork but didn't eat right away. "It feels strange," he admitted. "Like I don't deserve this." I sat across from him and looked him in the eye. "You don't have to earn your way back, Daniel. You're home. That's enough." He nodded slowly, his throat tightening, then took his first bite. I watched him, every small movement, every quiet sigh, as if I was watching time reverse. Like the years apart were slowly folding back into this one ordinary morning. Later that day, we sat on the porch, the air warm and still. The rain had washed the dust from everything. The grass looked greener, the sky clearer. Daniel leaned back in the old rocking chair, the one his father built, and said, "I forgot how peaceful it is here." "You used to chase fireflies out there," I said, pointing to the yard. "You'd try to catch them in jars," he chuckled. "I remember. You'd tell me not to trap them, that they needed to be free." I smiled faintly, "And you never listened." He laughed again, softer this time, his voice touched by nostalgia. Guess I didn't listen to a lot of things back then. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the silence settle. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was gentle, like a blanket wrapped around us both. That evening, Daniel helped me with the garden. My knees weren't what they used to be, and he insisted on doing the heavy work. Watching him kneel in the dirt, pulling weeds, reminded me of when he was little, the way he'd proudly bring me dandelions and call them flowers. After a while, he stopped and looked at me. "You've kept this place beautiful." "It kept me company," I said simply. When the house got too quiet, the garden listened. He looked around, his eyes softening. "I wish I'd come sooner." "You shouldn't have been alone all this time." I touched his arm. "I wasn't alone. Not really. You were always here, Daniel. Every time I passed your room, every time I heard a song you liked, every letter I almost wrote but didn't." He smiled sadly. "You always were better at holding on than I was." "Maybe," I said. "But I think you were better at finding your way back." He looked at me. And for the first time since he'd arrived, he smiled, not the hesitant kind, but real. The kind I used to see when he was a boy coming home from school with a story to tell. That night, after dinner, he asked if he could go through the old family albums. We sat together at the kitchen table with a stack of dusty photo books between us. The pages smelled faintly of age, the scent of time and memory. He opened one and smiled. "Look at that," he said, pointing to a photo of him on his father's shoulders at the county fair. "I forgot this day ever happened." "I remember it," I said, touching the edge of the photo. "You begged for cotton candy until your father finally gave in. You got it all over your face, and I told him not to spoil you." He laughed. "He always did anyway." "Yes," I whispered. "He did." We went through picture after picture, birthdays, school plays, Christmas mornings. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized that laughter had returned to my house. Quiet, hesitant laughter, but laughter nonetheless. The next morning, Daniel found me in the garden again. He held an old photo in his hand, one of the three of us, taken on his 10th birthday. "I want to frame this," he said. I nodded. "That's a good one." He hesitated. "I think I'd like to stay for a while, Mom. Maybe help fix up the porch, repaint the fence. You know, make the place nice again." My heart swelled. "You don't have to ask," I said. "This will always be your home." He smiled faintly. "I know that now." Over the next few weeks, something beautiful happened. Quietly, without announcement. Daniel started calling me Mom again. He'd gone years without saying it. He'd walk into the kitchen and say, "Mom, where do you keep the tools?" Or, "Mom, do you need anything from town?" And every time he said it, something inside me healed a little more. We shared slow evenings on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. Sometimes we talked about the past. Sometimes we didn't. One night, as the sky turned orange and pink, he said softly, "You know, I think Dad would have liked this. Seeing us here, together." I smiled through my tears. "I think he's here, Daniel. Maybe not where we can see him, but he's here." Daniel looked up at the sky and nodded. "Yeah, I think so too." As the days went by, I stopped counting how long he'd been home. I stopped waiting for him to leave again, because deep down I knew he wouldn't. The house no longer echoed with silence. It hummed with small sounds. The creak of the porch steps, the whistle of the kettle, his footsteps in the hallway. Every morning felt like a quiet miracle. It's been a few months since Daniel came home. The days move slowly here, the way I like them to. Mornings start with the smell of coffee and the sound of birds, just like they used to. Only now there's another sound that fills the house, his laughter, his voice, the way he hums to himself when he's fixing something or reading on the porch. Sometimes I just stop and listen, because for 20 years, I didn't have that. For 20 years, I lived in a kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that wraps around your heart and won't let go. The kind that makes you wonder if love can fade with distance. But I know now that love doesn't fade. It just waits. It waits in old photo albums. It waits in the smell of his favorite meal. It waits in every unopened letter and every prayer whispered before bed. Love doesn't forget the way home. It just takes time to find the road back. There were so many nights I asked myself what I did wrong, where I failed, what I could have said differently. I used to replay old conversations in my head, searching for clues, as if I could undo the past with enough regret. But when Daniel came back, I realized something simple and freeing. Forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about letting love be stronger than the pain. I forgave him, not because he asked me to, but because I needed peace, and I forgave myself, too, for all the times I thought I wasn't enough. That's what motherhood is, I think. It's loving someone even when they walk away. It's keeping the porch light on, even when you're not sure they'll ever come home again. The other evening, Daniel and I sat on that same porch as the sun went down. The air was warm and golden, the sky painted in soft pinks and oranges. He leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "I'm glad I came back, Mom." I looked at him and smiled. "So am I." There was a pause, the kind that feels full, not empty. Then he said, "I'm sorry for the years I missed." And I answered, "We can't get the years back, Daniel. But we can make today count. And maybe that's enough." He nodded. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. Sometimes love doesn't return with grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes it comes back quietly, in the way someone shows up, helps you fix a fence, or makes coffee for 2 a.m. That's how Daniel came back to me. Not with promises, but with presence. If there's one thing these years have taught me, it's that time can take people apart, but love, real love, always finds a way through. It may not look the same. It may come later than you hoped, but it comes. So if you're listening to this and someone you love has drifted away, don't lose hope. Keep the door unlocked. Keep their picture on the shelf. And when you think of them, do it with love, not anger. Because one day they might find their way back. And when they do, you'll be ready to open the door. That night, after Daniel went to bed, I stood by the window and looked up at the stars. The same stars I used to whisper my prayers to when he was gone, and I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because my heart was finally quiet. Forgiveness had made room for peace, and peace had made room for love again. Maybe that's what home really is. Not a house, not a town, not the years we lost, but the people who come back to us and the hearts we choose to keep open.